let the record show he paid $100 more than I did. And that'd be a lot of extra cloth on mine too. They made his out of scraps. Well, heavens, thanks. I know this issue's controversial, but the 5th District caseload warrants an extra judge.
Totally does. Actually, they need like 2. Really.
Are y'all ready to roll?
Yeah. Would you talk about them in the order they came up? Would you talk about hate crimes first?
Sure. Hate crimes, we had a fabulous debate. I thought this is the great challenge and opportunity of America and Utah is to figure out exactly what liberty and justice for all means. And we made a good run at it. Didn't get it, but hopefully we had some good conversations and caused some people to think, and I'm optimistic that in the future crimes against communities will be punished as such.
Did the LDS Church kill this bill?
After they made, by the way, I had a wonderful meeting with representatives of the LDS Church this morning. I revere the institution, and I respect their ability to, like any organization, to weigh in on legislation. But yeah, I felt that we were going to pass hate crimes through the process, and after their statement, there was really no way to pass it.
Senator, can you speak to the irony of that, given the fact that Mormon people were persecuted out of the Midwest and into a place that they had to inhabit that was pure barren desert?
Well, that was one of the interesting things to hear in the floor debate is there still is the perception that hate crimes legislation would only protect minorities. It would protect anyone other than white male Mormons, and that's just not the case. We say that crimes based on religion, which can include Mormonism, crimes based on race, which can include white, crimes based on gender, which can include male, they will all be punished as such. Not only a crime against the individual, but a crime against the community that was targeted.
Did the representative of the LDS Church explain why they seemingly changed their position? Back when hate crimes had no chance up here, Bills made a statement saying we oppose gay marriage or same-sex marriage, but we have no position on a hate crimes bill. It would seem that they moved more liberal in some respects, but more conservative in that respect. Did you talk about that?
We did not. I expressed my frustration that I had not received word or any kind of conversation until I saw the press release, and I think that was just human error. I accept that. I do that at times. I have meetings and I don't have all the stakeholders. Then I expressed my concern that I don't think any one group gets to be the arbiter on the future progress on LGBT issues, and trying to emphasize that this is not an LGBT issue. This involves, a bunch of categories that often are the subject of crime. And then lastly, I express my concern that the statement talks about maintaining a balance, and I think it's inappropriate, whether people agree or disagree with hate crimes legislation. It's a real thing. I mean, should you or should you not punish crimes against a community? To say that is the moral equivalent of bills on the quote-unquote other side, which those seem to be genital inspection bills for bathroom privileges for transgender individuals, or bills that attempt to ignore the Supreme Court's Obergefell decision. My bill's legitimate. Those are creepy and illegitimate. There isn't a moral equivalency there. So it isn't equal to kill all bills that might deal with the LGBT community.
Would you talk about the death penalty, please?
Sure. Anyone else have, before we move on, I guess, if we're doing them in
I
order?
just have real quick, just to keep it on the topic. Do you think this is just one of those social issues that takes a few years in the Utah legislature?
I do. I'm, of course, I want it. I'm sad, frustrated it didn't pass. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm pretty honored that I get to take part in a great debate. What does equality mean? What does liberty mean? What does justice mean? We are moving forward as a state. We are moving forward as a nation. And sometimes to move forward, you have to lose a battle.
Who would you like to see take it up in your place when you're gone from the Senate? Anybody in particular?
You know, I think that there are 20-something other great candidates. I'd like to see them all take it up.
Senator Bramble switched his vote at the end. I think he has till Monday to reconsider. Any thoughts on whether that's likely at this point, or have they kind of made up their mind?
Yeah, so Senator Bramble did ask me if I wanted to hold it and try to bring it back, and the votes just aren't there. We had, you know, if I felt that we did not have adequate conversation, if I felt that people did not understand the legislation, yeah, it'd be worth bringing back. People understand it, and they've given it due consideration, and this year we just didn't advance it.
Could you talk about the death penalty if there are no more questions on this topic?
Y'all ready to move on? Anything else on hate crime?
Well, how do you feel about that vote?
Death penalty?
Yeah.
Speak to the tightness of the vote, if you could.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm very excited about the vote on the death penalty. It's one of the more interesting issues I've had up here in my 16 years, where I talk with people, and like me, when I had my original dinner time conversation with a friend, he said, hey, why do we have the death penalty in Utah? Why don't we do away with it? And I said, well, because it makes sense. And so I laid out all the theoretical reasons, and so we started getting into the realities of it. And as I stated on the floor, the death penalty, it doesn't work. There's no deterrence in it. It further victimizes the families of the victims. It makes celebrities out of the perpetrators of the crime. It just simply doesn't work. And so it's been really neat to have these conversations with my colleagues, my friends, to see them move on the issue. You know, I think that if I had needed the votes, there might have been another vote or two that people would have pulled out of their back pocket to make sure that this went forward.
There were a lot of advocates involved, and the Archdiocese was very present here. Can you give us some insight as to the role of all of the players that effectively influenced the final vote?
No, I'd rather, you know, other folks who are involved with this speak for themselves, and so I'll just, you know, speak for me. And I do think that this is a growing coalition of people who understand that the death penalty is not working. I mean, you know, morally, philosophically, I can't say I'm opposed to the death penalty. I'm moving in that direction. But for me, it's the pragmatic concerns. I just feel horrible for the families that they can't get closure. And, you know, as a fiscal conservative, it just makes no sense to me that we're spending a lot of money to create this bad situation.
Putting stock in Weiler's dissecting of the legislative fiscal analyst report and saying it was in error and wrong in terms of the cost?
No, none. I mean, you know, these folks, they're expert in what they do, and they have advanced degrees in finance and economics, and, you know, I disagree with some of their notes, but the process up here is we respect the work they do.
I would guess that if your bill passes, executions are done, and that those now on death row, though the bill would not, I don't think it applies retroactively. I don't know that nonetheless, the stomach would be gone to do any executions. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree, Rod. I think I would strongly disagree. That's one thing that I want to be very sensitive to is the the families who are in this situation, they have their expectations set, and I don't want to disrupt those expectations.
So you would be in favor of not having this be retroactive and have the life sentence, those death warrants be commuted to life sentences?
Well, that's why I drafted it to be prospective. Those families, they are victims in several ways, and I just don't want to. I don't have the hubris to. I have plenty of hubris. I don't have the hubris to step in and just upset their expectations. I just think that would be a cruel thing to do.
But is that likely still to happen because of the current state of how they are able to carry out an execution right now?
Well, Ben, I think in asking the question, you help argue my point for doing away with this. It's very difficult and time-consuming to actually execute people on death row. So the point was brought up that, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but that Virginia, the duration on death row is 7 years compared to our 25 or so.
And in Texas, it's something like months, really.
Texas, Florida, they really are in the business of capital punishment, and so they obviously spend a lot of money to litigate the appeals and move things along. And Utah, we're not a capital-rich state, and we're really struggling. In the criminal arena, we're struggling to fund judicial reform. We're struggling to fund. That's kind of an irony here is, Senator Weiler wants to fund indigent defense. Well, heavens, that's $1.6 million extra for every person who we put in prison for life rather than attempt to execute.
Is a week enough time to get it through the House?
Oh yeah. I figure we're probably halfway through this session right now. Maybe a little under half.
Have you been counting votes over there yet?
No, not at all, Robert, but
Representative Hutchings, is he?
yeah, man, I could not have a better sponsor. Eric is just a dear friend, and it's impossible for me to say no to Eric. And people respect him, and especially on criminal issues, issues dealing with crime and courts and our punishment. So he's the perfect sponsor, as I believe some of you heard yesterday from the speaker. He is strongly in favor of repealing the death penalty, and I am, again, I'd say absolutely shocked by the representatives who came to me yesterday, telling me they're in favor of repealing the death penalty. Some of them, I would have bet and lost a lot of money that they would never support this legislation.
Senator, you said a couple weeks ago you bet against it, so change that advice now?
Did I say bet against?
Bet against the death penalty.
We're going to pass it.
We do have a question online. It says, how does Senator Urquhart feel about this being his last session, these bills, and lasting influence he's had with these issues?
Tender subject. I every day I just look around, and I can't believe that I get to do this. I just think I'm just the most common person on earth, and to be able to do it is amazing. Awfully enjoyable that I get to take on some of these issues on the last lap. I'm really loving the last lap. My colleagues are being very good and gracious to me. I will miss this tremendously. Honestly, I don't think the state will miss me very much because we're.
Is he announcing his retirement?
we're an extremely well-run state. When I was at my freshman orientation, the only thing I remember is someone stood up, and this was the entirety of his speech. He said the state was doing just fine before you got here. It'll do just fine after you leave. Don't screw it up while you're here. And state will do just fine without me.
On that point,
Truer words never spoken. That's the absolute truth.
On that point, are you going to point out how I have screwed it up while I've been here?
No, I was going to take you back to last year when you introduced, on the point of judicial reform, you introduced a bill that seemed to be echoed by Chief Justice Durant's comments of the state of the judiciary at the beginning of the session. Do you recall any of that? And I was wondering if you had any comments to make about that as some sort of maybe vindication, because his comments were exactly the kind of thing that you were discussing in that bill from last year.
God bless you. That is one of my, I think, biggest victories up here, that it's completely under the radar. It's, to your question of how do I feel, I lost this battle and I'm bummed. But we're going to win this war on hate crimes. There's no doubt. I mean, look where we are as a state, as a society, compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago. If the issue is full inclusion of LGBT individuals in the fabric of our society, we know how that's going to turn out. It's just a question of when we get there. But so on this issue, my very first year up here, we inadvertently repealed the unauthorized practice of law statute, which means only lawyers can practice law. Now that was put in during the Great Depression, when lawyers saw their income sliding. They kicked out all the charlatans, in other words, all the competitors. And so we have a scenario where most Utahns, 2/3, they can't afford legal help, which means the courts exist to grind them into powder for wealthier, more privileged people. And so, I've worked on that, made a few incremental gains. It's like we need to get from here to Dallas, and I advanced just 4 inches. I happened to be friends with Dino Himonis, who was Judge Dino Himonis at the time, and I chewed on his ear nonstop on this, and he put on the black robes of the Supreme Court, and first thing he did is he convened an Access to Justice committee, and I was on that, and we made great progress. It's now in front of the bar to allow non-lawyers to provide some legal services. And so I think that's one of the most important things I've ever addressed up here, and just the miracle of this crazy process. You lose enough battles, you might just win the war.
You have been known to say, this is a different topic, you have been known to say WPU money is the education money that makes the least change. Would you talk about that?
I don't know if I said that.
I heard you.
Good thing Rod isn't standing here with the microphone under your chin.
On public ed, I think that a point I might have been making, Rod, because I do stick by this point, is we do have a funding problem in public education. We need more money in public ed. Period. End of story. Not end of story. Period. We need more money. But that's part of the story. We need innovation. We need creativity. I think one of the most important pieces of legislation I've seen up here my entire time is Senator Niederhauser's school grading bill, because that's what we need. Is we need accountability, and let's shine a light where we're struggling, and then let's deal with that. I'm copying Senator Niederhauser. I'm trying to do something in higher ed this year where building funding, we're going to rank our 8 institutions and see how well they're doing. And there's going to be a holdback based on, the worst will have more money held back on buildings and so on, because that's a way to have accountability. Let's find out who's struggling, and then let's figure out how to deal with that.
Is reform, you said innovation, is innovation more likely to come from the legislature than from, say, the teachers union?
Great question. So far what I've seen up here, the source, the font of innovation has been more the legislature. I'd say far and away. However, should that be the case? Absolutely not, because we're not in the trenches. Educators, they understand it infinitely better than us. They need to be the ones innovating and pushing limits. That's why I love dealing with higher ed. Is higher ed, they're more aggressive, they're more willing to speak out, they are innovative, they're very discontent with the status quo. So I bring up ideas and they're willing to say, you know, that's a stupid idea, but here's where you should go. And they're the ones who are pushing the reform, and we just get to enact it.
What, contrast that with public ed?
You know, I think things are improving, but for a long time, you know, what I heard was legitimate complaints, but an unwillingness, complaints about the status quo, but an unwillingness to try something beyond the status quo.
I'd make an argument that the innovation isn't really happening inside the legislature or inside the union. It's happening from the outside. Technology is you've seen the changes that have happened over the last just 10 years. And technology is going to be a wave of change, continual change, and it will press upon us and upon our education system. Online education, tools for the teacher, those are the things that are driving, and it's just coming from the world we live in.
You know, Rob,
And if we don't keep up with it, we will fall behind.
And that's the reason in the classroom, we really need to put more money into the classroom to create this innovation. Because you can't do it if the teacher doesn't have the tools to be able to do that innovative work that needs to be done.
you know,
We've got to get into the classroom. It's not, it can't be just, we're going to give you a tablet and walk away from it. It's got to be, we're going to give you a tablet. You'll learn how to use that tablet in a way that's in the classroom. That's what has to be.
It
That's the
changes student
technology.
outcomes.
One thing I have said up here many times is you can't push a rope. And so that is why innovation needs to come from within education. We need to do our best to be respectful in the way we phrase things and get them to give us the ideas. Remember, you're talking to the only guy in the history of the state of Utah who had a bill overturned by citizen referendum. You know, I get that people, institutions, they're only ready for the change they're ready for. And so higher ed, I've worked very hard to understand what they're doing, what are their concerns, what are their opportunities, their problems, and go to them where they understand, wow, this guy, we can have a conversation with him. He doesn't quite get as much as we do, but we can have a conversation, and I'm their friend, I'm their ally. At times, I'm their provocateur and you know, the one who's pushing them and making them uncomfortable, but it's a good partnership where I don't just drop something on them from high and then they kill it in the trenches. So innovation, we need the folks in the trenches to work with us, or it dies from when it gets down to the trenches where people are supposed to implement it.
You know, the innovation needs to come from the various boards of educations and superintendents, speaking with their employees, if you will, and encouraging this to go on. I think a couple of years ago, we heard up in Wasatch County, Heber, I think it was the Heber School District, that has done some of those innovative things by challenging the teachers and giving them the tools to do that work.
Any other questions?
Excellent.
How's your budget looking?
We're getting closer.
Everybody gonna get what they want? Is it gonna
No.
be Christmas all over again?
And it might be Christmas all over again, but even at Christmas time, you don't get everything that you want. I guess maybe some students, but I've never, anyway. Do we have any questions from our viewers?
We do have one question on Twitter.
Okay.
It says, with all of these fundamental bills being proposed, how about proposing a Utah lottery bill?
Nope.
Great question. A lot of stakeholders out there, the population resistance to anything that has to deal with gambling. You may argue that that's not gambling, but that's the way it's viewed here in the legislature. I don't see that happening anytime in the future, near future at least.
Here's an important reality. I was flippant in that answer. You can't open yourself up to just a little gambling. Because of federal laws, if you open yourself up to a little, then you're mandated, you're forced, you've opened yourself up to a lot.
You know, also allow the other indigenous nations in this state to open it up even further.
Are they prohibited by state law? Because being a sovereign nation, couldn't they just go ahead and do it anyway?
Only in Utah and Hawaii, because
Only
we
in
have no gambling.
Okay.
And so if the state has any gambling, then tribes in the state are allowed to have gambling also.
I did not know that.
But nobody's looking at legislating against FanDuel or any of the daily fantasy sports sites still at this point. Nobody's considering those gambling.
We've been talking about it. I don't know if there's a piece of legislation though.
Probably not.
Nothing this session.
Yeah.
Things are still
I
dropping
don't
every
know of any.
afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still got
Sounds like
to
something, sounds like something we'd
You
tackle.
could run a bill.
Right.
Yeah, now that I have time freed up from hate crimes,
Open up a bill file. So thanks for watching us. Thanks for the meeting
Thanks.
for being here today.
Thank you. A boxcar if you want to fly.
all right. Government.